Hey everyone! Today in the lab we are going to be synthesizing smells, or specifically odorific compounds. And we're going to be using one reaction type to produce a large variety of compounds, and also in those compounds we'll have unique smells. So this lab isn't going to be as intense as the lab where you synthesized aspirin. And in actuality, most students on Monday, or well, all of them, were able to leave within an hour. So you guys should be out of here by 8 p.m. tonight. Alright, so before we start talking about why we've had you guys do this specific lab, out of all potential labs we could have chem students do, it's important to talk about what we're doing exactly. So on this upcoming lecture on Monday, we're going to start talking about functional groups. And functional groups are specific chemical moieties that give generic organic compounds specific and unique chemical properties. You can kind of consider functional groups as spices. So if you're making a generic broth or something like that, it's going to be pretty bland. And you use spices to give that broth unique flavor. Functional groups act the same way. So we're going to have some generic organic compounds of just a bunch of hydrocarbons, or you have a chain of carbons with hydrogen sticking off of it. And we're going to be adding functional groups to give that compound unique chemical properties. So for these reactions that you'll be doing in lab, we're going to be taking two compounds. We're going to have one compound that contains a functional group known as an alcohol, this OH compound here that we've talked about previously. We're going to be mixing it with another compound with another functional group that we have not discussed yet, but we'll discuss more later, called a carboxylic acid. This is when you have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen, and that carbon then is attached to an OH. So we're going to be mixing these two compounds together, where one has a functional group of a carboxylic acid and one has an alcohol. It's going to come together to create a compound that has this functional group that we call an ester. And we'll talk more about this a little bit later, about why this definition of this is. So we have an alcohol interacting with the carboxylic acid. Just highlight these all in red. You may have noticed that we have this unique nomenclature of these R's added onto these molecules. We haven't discussed that yet. So what's unique about these reactions is that the only thing that really matters is this functional group interacting with this functional group. You can have a lot of other stuff hanging off this molecule and it doesn't matter. So chemists, being very lazy, shorten this to signify this fact with this R group here. So this R group can represent anything. So you could have a run-of-the-mill CH3 methyl group that would be attached to this R, or you could have even something more complicated. Maybe some more carbons. Here I'm just drawing an ethyl group and a 2-carbon chain, or it could even be something more variety, or more wild, or have a large variety. And the same with this R group over here. Now, because this is a different molecule, this R group could be completely different. So I'll designate this as an R prime. And this could be anything that you could imagine, any combination of atoms. So when these two molecules form, this R group just comes along for the ride, and it will be right there on the molecule. And then this R group from the alcohol also comes along for the ride, and it'll be present here. So I have an example of that, just to solidify this a little bit more. So one of the reactions that you'll be doing today entails mixing this compound with methanol to produce this ester. So we'll notice off the bat that we have the alcohol functional group present, as well as the carboxylic acid. And these come together and react to form a compound that contains an ester. And just like we saw with our example, where here we have this R group, we had called this R prime. And this is now present on this side of the molecule. And then we have this original R group, and that's all this stuff over here. So it's not just one methyl group. We actually have an aromatic group and another alcohol group. The only thing that's important for this reaction is the carboxylic acid in this alcohol, so all of this is considered an R group because it's coming along for the ride. So we could then say that this was all an R group. And so for this lab, you're actually going to be doing a variety of these reactions. Where you'll be taking different carboxylic acids with different chemical formulas. Here we have the most simple, acetic acid, a carboxylic acid, and a methyl group. And then you'll be mixing some more complicated stuff with different alcohols. So they always have the OH, but the exact nature of this R group can vary. So here we have just a methyl group, this would be methanol, or we have some more varied stuff that you'll be using. And what's really cool about these is that even though it's the same base reaction, carboxylic acid interacting with an alcohol to produce an ester containing compound, these all have really unique smells. And in the process of the lab, part of the thing that you'll have to do is figure out what smells are associated with what compounds. And it's pretty surprising that just a small functional group with some of the differences that you'll experience will have completely different smells. Some will smell like one fruit, and the others will smell like a different one. So what's really cool about this is that we have one base reaction, but if we change what atoms are in the compounds, then we can have completely different smells. So the reason we decided to have you guys do this lab, out of all possible labs that chemistry students could do, is because it highlights this really cool property that chemists figured out in the last century or so, that if you have certain functional groups present, like in this lab we're dealing with esters, and in the previous class we talked about aromatic groups, these were responsible for smells. And it's pretty crazy that you can have one compound, one chemical compound, that evokes such a strong smell, such as getting close to an orange or grape, that you'd imagine, and previously people imagined, that it would be a huge mix of compounds that would be responsible to get that odor. But when we found out it was just one compound, chemists really went crazy, and there are a lot of chemists that spent their entire careers doing the types of reactions that you're going to be spending a few hours today doing, trying to figure out what smells could be recreated with different compounds. So they basically did this ad infinitum. Thousands of different variations with different functional groups present, different lengths of carbon chains, to see what types of smells we could get out of this. So with that, have a good lab.